Hey guys, today we have a TvT game to watch and we're going to use it as an example of how to benchmark yourself against yourself. When we talk about benchmarking, what we're talking about is figuring out exactly the most number of workers you can get if you have only one command center, the most number of workers you can have if you have 2 command centers or 3 command centers, also the most you can possibly spend on army if you do nothing but build army with all of the money you're not spending on SCVs and supply depots. Doing this gives you the ideal or perfect numbers that you can see here in red and yellow, and then you can plot against that the numbers for this actual game, which you can see in blue. I'm going to open Reaper Fast Expand and decide based on what I see what I'm going to do from there, but as you can see from the benchmarks, during this harassment in which I kill several SCVs, I knock him down to 19 SCVs at 6 minutes, but I knock myself down to 21 SCVs at 6 minutes because I'm too busy microing the Reaper to go back home and build workers. This is where benchmarking can really help you. When my Reaper was in his base, I saw a reactor Hellion opening with only 1 gas, which to me means he's going to expand, which is what prompted me to get this quick third command center. Now, we're going to watch later on how this quick third command center screws with the benchmarks, giving me a far smaller army than I normally would have early and a far bigger army than I normally would have later on. And the risk with that, of course, is that he's going to do some sort of frontal push. For example, a Banshee tank push would just straight up kill me. But because he only had a single gas and I killed about 6 workers, I'm not really super worried about any sort of early push. What I am worried about, however, is a big harassment play. So I'm going to have myself about an 8-minute and 30-second Thor popping out to defend against either an early Banshee or an early drop. And I also have an engineering bay that's not doing anything. It's just there in case I need to build a turret against an early cloaked Banshee. I should be able to use a scan to buy time until eventually my Thor and later on turrets push it away. So it turns out that it was the Hellions. I have Blue Flame, he does not, so he's forced to get out of there even though it is 3 Hellions versus 3 Hellions. So I vaguely or generally understand that by making an early third command center, I'm going to have a much smaller army early and a much bigger army later on. But we're going to be able to look at that the way it actually turned out over in Mr. Benchmarkville. So now that the harassment is taken care of, let's take a look at the graph. The graph here in red shows average army spending per minute. You can see early on it should be about 500, and then later on it should be about 750. If you were one basing in this game, it approached 0, and then later on in the game I was able to average well over 1,000 because of the early third command center and my skimping on defenses. So even though at 11 minutes I'd already started my massive production of $1,500 a minute instead of 500 or something, it's going to take me several minutes to actually catch up to the army size of someone who just slow and steady wins the race, produces $500 a minute all game. So the longer I can delay before forcing an engagement, the better it's going to work out for me because I assume my spending is far greater than my opponent's, but I want to make sure in TvT position is a big deal in the late game, especially when siege tanks are involved. So I want to make sure I'm actually the one that makes the push across the field. So this game is the orange line, the benchmarks are in red and blue, and you can see right up at about 11.5 minutes is when I finally have a bigger army now than I would have if I'd just gone for a 1 or 2 base normal play. Compositionally, I'm opening with 3 factories, then adding 2 more and not adding any air units until I've taken my 3rd base. It's going to be a Hellbat tank with a couple of Thors, maybe even just 1 Thor against hopefully Mech, which is what I scouted him on. The hope here is that he's going to get 1 or 2 starports and pump out Vikings, and those Vikings are going to be completely useless against me because I have enough orbitals to throw down the scans that I'll need. There's a period of time, or usually around 12 minutes, but definitely whenever you throw down your 3rd, when you're going to have so much income that trying to build supply depots 1 or 2 at a time is no longer viable, just go straight up to 200U. Another useful benchmark to keep track of is when should you be hitting 200U if you don't lose anything, and the answer is about 14 minutes and 20 seconds. In this game, I'm not going to hit 200U until 16 minutes, and that's because of my troubles with producing enough workers early on, and also the fact that I'm producing extremely expensive units. In TvT, typically, unless somebody makes a huge macro mistake, whoever pushes first is going to get a huge advantage because you can often bounce back and forth from one position to another and finally get siege tanks sieged up in an aggressive position where it's hard to attack into siege tanks. Siege tanks are great defensively, so why not defend the middle of his base? This game is very much in the style of Halby. As you can see, I'm at 200U and just now pushing across the field. I've secured my bases back home with turrets because I don't usually have the APM compared to my opponents to deal with multi-pronged nonsense. I want my bases to defend themselves while I make one giant push, abusing the fact that I simply made a larger army than he did to win the game. If we both have the same sized army and there are multiple battlefields, I will tend to lose to much faster players than me. I really like Hellbat tank as a composition, and especially if you just have one Thor or two Thors so that you can't use Banshees to surround you, and you bring SCVs with your Thors, so that if you need turrets, you can throw down a bunch of turrets. It's really satisfying to get like 5 siege tanks and then throw up 5 new turrets all right at his choke to his natural. That's just extremely funny and fun. So this game came down to one big push, and so many of my games do, because I don't have the APM to take equal-sized armies and micro-battle with my opponent or do multi-pronged harasses and attacks in multiple places. My goal is to make games go just long enough so that the fact that I was paying attention to making as many SCVs as possible and you weren't can make me win. That's where benchmarking helps. Even though I won this game, the benchmarking allows me to play against myself instead of my opponent and look for areas to improve upon. So if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments down below. See ya.